Jason Chandler sat on the couch, looking at his phone. Not long ago, he received a disturbing call from Karen, his wife of nearly 10 years. Earlier that day, his PI told him she and her friend had just boarded a flight to Honolulu. He knew they planned to spend the week there, even though she told him something different. It was just the latest in a long line of lies and bad decisions on her part. He wondered to himself how he could have been so foolish and blind. For nearly 10 years, he had given everything to build a life with Karen, but that was all gone now. He took another sip of his coffee and sat back in his chair, closing his eyes. He thought about the last decade. He met Karen in college 13 years ago. They were both working for a business degree and were part of the same study group. That led to them dating. Eventually, they fell in love and married after graduation. He went to work for his father, who owned a chain of successful tire stores across the state. He had always worked for his dad, spending his summers in one of the many stores his father owned. Sometimes he worked in the shop, replacing tires and brakes. Sometimes he worked as a runner, driving tires and parts to some of the local shops. As a result, he learned a lot about the business. After college, his father asked him to work for him at the corporate headquarters in the accounting department. Over the years, Jason proved himself to be more than capable of handling whatever needed to be done, and was now in charge of the accounting department, working directly for Mike Allen, the CFO, who was set to retire in a couple years. Jason knew that it was his father's dream to hand the company over to him when he retired, and he knew that when Mike retired, he would be promoted to take over his position. Karen, meanwhile, had taken a job as a realtor. After they married, she went to school and got her license to sell real estate. She was really good at her job and made good money, even during leaner years when the market wasn't doing very well. They had a good life, or so he thought. They saved money and were able to buy a nice house in the suburbs. They each drove a nice, fairly new car, and to all outside appearances, had a secure marriage. They didn't have any children, something which bothered him more than her. Right now, he thought that it was something of a blessing in disguise. Early on, Karen said there was something wrong with her tubes, so she had them tied. He consoled her and suggested they look into adoption, but Karen dismissed the idea. Eventually, he accepted the notion that they would never have any children. But several things happened over the last year that made him think something was going on, something that would forever change his relationship with Karen. For starters, Karen began spending more time with her friends than ever before. He never begrudged her some time out, as he knew how stressful her job was. But the every 2-week happy hour that only lasted until 7 p.m. became a 2 or 3 night a week event. And depending on the day of the week, she might not get home until midnight or later. Jason wasn't happy about it and expressed his displeasure, but she dismissed his concerns, saying she was under a lot of stress at work and deserved time to relax. "So what are you doing until midnight?" He asked her one night when she got home, her hair disheveled and her clothes smelling like smoke. "Oh, we just had a few drinks," she said. "Sometimes we might dance if we feel like it." "Look, Jace, it's none of your concern. I'm a grown-up and I don't need you telling me what to do. So please, back off, okay?" Jason looked at her, shocked. She had never spoken to him like this before. She saw the look on his face and softened up. "I'm sorry, Jace," she said. "I didn't mean to get upset with you. It's just that we're under a lot of pressure with the market the way it is." "You've worked through tough times in the market before, and it didn't bother you," he said. "What's different about this time?" "You have no idea how hard it is sometimes," she said. "The competition is getting worse and worse, and the higher-ups are putting more pressure on us to sell property." "I understand that, dear," he told her. "But you don't need to take it out on me. I'm on your side, remember." She smiled and hugged him. "You're right, dear," she said. "Please accept my apology." "All right, I accept," he said. "But please freshen up a bit. No offense, but you smell like smoke." "Sorry," she said. There were a lot of people smoking at the club. "I'll go freshen up." He laid down and was asleep by the time she made it to bed. The next few months saw other changes as well. Even worse, her attitude toward him seemed to change. Before, she always asked about his work and took interest in his hobbies. Now, it seemed that she could care less what he had to say. Then there was the day he caught her in a blatant lie. One day he decided to drop by her office to take her out to lunch. When he got there, however, he was told she was out showing some property. That night, after Karen got home from whatever it was she was doing with her friends, he asked about her day. "I was in the office all day today," she said. "I had a lot of paperwork to catch up on, so I just grabbed a sandwich out of the vending machine." Jason was shocked. She just lied to him with a straight face. As far as he knew, this was the first time she had ever done that. He thought about questioning her further, but chose not to. In her state of mind, she would probably get upset, and he was simply too tired to deal with that. However, he couldn't help but wonder, how many other times had she lied to him? Later that night, as they lay in bed, he rolled over and looked at her. She saw the concern on his face. "What's wrong, Jace?" she asked. "I'm worried," he said. "About what?" she asked. "Us," he said. "I feel like we're growing apart from each other." "Do you still love me?" "Of course I do, honey," she said, putting an arm around him. "You know that, right? Honestly, I'm not so sure," he said. "I can't remember the last time you told me, and it's been a while since we've been close. It seems you're away from home more often than not." "I'm sorry," she said. "It's just the pressure from work. I do love you, please believe me. Can you start showing me more affection?" he asked. "Of course, baby," she said, hugging him. Things went back to normal for a month or so, but the same pattern began to emerge again. What is happening? He asked himself for the umpteenth time. It started to become clear to him what was happening the day his longtime friend, Ron Green, called him, asking if they could meet up. "Sure, I can meet you for a drink," Jason said. "What's going on?" "I really can't say over the phone," Ron said. "But it's important." "Okay," Jason said. "I'll meet you there at 5:30 if that works." They ended the call and Jason met Ron at the bar that evening. Jason wasn't too worried about being late, as Karen was almost always away until 6 or 7 p.m., sometimes later. "Okay, buddy," Jason said as they sipped their drinks. "Spill it." "What's going on?" Ron began. "I saw your wife today while I was out doing my runs." "Yeah?" Jason asked. "She sells real estate." "Probably out showing some property," I'm sure, Ron said. "But I never knew selling real estate involved so much touching what?" Jason asked. "Come on. You're joking, right?" "I wish I was. Buddy," he said. "I was driving down Riverside Drive, and I saw your wife coming out of a house with some man. They were holding hands, and then they hugged. I'm not talking about a quick hug either. They were all over each other." "That can't be true," Jason said. "Are you sure you saw my Karen?" Ron pulled out his cell phone and showed Jason a picture. Sure enough, it was Karen hugging a man. "Oh man," Jason said quietly as he handed the phone back. "Can you email me that picture?" "Sure," Ron said, typing away on his phone. "So what are you going to do?" Jason shook his head. "I don't know, buddy," he said. "Things have been off for a while now, but I would never have thought she'd do something like this." "A friend of mine is a private investigator," Ron said. "If you want, I can put you in contact with him." "Do that," Jason said. "I need to know what the heck is going on." They said their goodbyes and headed out the door. Karen was in the kitchen when he got home. This was something new, he thought to himself. "You're home early," he said, giving her a hug. "I'm not complaining, by the way." She smiled and hugged him back. "Where were you?" she asked. "I was out having a drink with Ron," he said. "I wasn't expecting you home so early, so I figured, why not?" "Everything okay with your friend?" she asked. "Not really," Jason said. "He just found out that the wife of one of his friends is being unfaithful." "Oh?" she asked. "Yeah," Jason said. "He saw her hugging and holding hands with some guy earlier today." Jason thought he saw her flinch just a bit. "Well," she said, "maybe he's jumping to conclusions." "I don't know," Jason said. "I'm just glad we don't have that problem." Again, he thought he saw her flinch at his comment. "It would crush me if you ever did anything like that to me." "I would never hurt you like that," she said, hugging him. "I love you too much." "I'm glad to hear you say that," he told her, hugging her. "So why are you home so early?" "Well, our annual company convention is coming up this weekend, so I thought I'd start packing. And I wanted to spend the next few nights with you since we'll be apart for a few days," she said. "It's in Las Vegas this year." "Where are you going?" he asked. "I'm going to the convention center," she said. "We're all staying at the Westgate Resort. I heard it's a really nice hotel. So when are you leaving?" he asked. "I'll be leaving Friday afternoon, right after lunch," she said. "That was in 2 days. Are you getting another award this year?" he asked. She always won awards for being the top seller in the region. "Probably," she said. They shared another hug. "Well then," he said, "why don't we go upstairs and celebrate your successful year together?" She smiled and took his hand. "I thought you'd never ask," she said. They spent the evening enjoying each other's company, but Jason had other thoughts on his mind. Would she be unfaithful to him over the weekend, he wondered. "Say, I have some vacation time coming up," he said. "Why don't I take a few days off and come with you?" Maybe we can spend the week in Vegas and relax a bit. Our 10th anniversary is coming up next week, after all. That sounds like a lot of fun, she said. But I'll be really busy with seminars and meetings. I don't think we'd have much time together. Plus, I have to get back to work right after the convention. How about we celebrate our anniversary when I return? I promise I'll make it up to you. Okay, he said. I'll hold you to that. The next day, he got in touch with Ron and got the name and number of a private investigator. He set up a meeting with the investigator for that day and drove over before lunch. Good morning, Mr. Chandler, the middle-aged man said as Jason entered his cluttered office. Good to meet you. Ron mentioned you might be coming by. Please call me Jerry. How can I assist you? Jason explained the situation and informed him about Karen's upcoming trip to Las Vegas. Vegas? Jerry asked. Do you think she plans to meet someone at the convention? I'm not sure, Jason said. It's a possibility. Well, I have some contacts out there who owe me a favor or two, Jerry said. Here's what we can do. We'll keep an eye on her there, and if you want, we can discreetly place a camera and a microphone in her hotel room. It'll cost extra, though. I expected that, Jason said. But I need to know the truth. Jerry handed him a digital audio recorder. It's quite simple to use, Jerry explained. It activates when it detects voices, so all you have to do is place it under her car seat and turn it on. You can retrieve it later after she's left. I assume she'll be leaving her car at the airport. That's what she usually does, Jason said. Great, Jerry said. Don't worry, we've got it all covered. If she is doing anything suspicious, we'll find out. Here's my private number in case you hear anything. Feel free to call me anytime. Thanks, Jason said, writing a check from his personal account instead of the joint account. Both he and Karen had their own accounts, separate from their joint checking account which they used to pay their bills. They had agreed on this arrangement years ago, promising to deposit no more than 10% of their net earnings. Jason had been saving his money for a cruise, but now he had a different use for it. That night, Karen finished packing for her trip. Jason offered to help carry her bags to the car, an offer she gladly accepted. Thanks for your help, she said. Giving him a hug, he brought the bags to her car and placed them in the trunk. He couldn't help but notice how much she had packed. It seemed like more than enough for a weekend. As he placed her overnight bag in the trunk, curiosity got the best of him and he decided to take a peek at what she had packed. He immediately noticed the container of her medication, but there were only 10 tablets left. Why did she have birth control pills? He wondered. Didn't she say she had a different form of contraception, or was that a lie? He glanced at the clothes she packed. Some of them seemed appropriate for a business meeting, but many looked like outfits for going out to clubs, dresses he had never seen her wear before. He took out his phone and discreetly took some pictures. After opening her car door, he slipped the audio recorder under her seat and made sure it was turned on. He closed the car doors and made sure everything was locked. The next morning, Karen gave him her room number at breakfast and promised to call him every night. I love you, she told him as she hugged him. I love you too, he said. He watched as she drove off. When he got to work, he called Jerry and gave him her room number. Perfect, Jerry said. Thanks. I'll get my team on it right away. That afternoon, he received a call from Karen, letting him know she had arrived at the airport and was about to depart. I'll call you once I'm settled in my room, she said. I'll be waiting for your call, he said. Remember, I love you. I love you too, baby, she said. I'll miss you. Jason sarcastically thought to himself, sure you will, you dishonest person. I'll miss you too, he said instead. After ending the call, he saw his father standing in the doorway of his office. Is everything all right, son? His father asked. You look down. I don't know. Dad, Jason said. His father walked into the office and closed the door. Is everything okay at home? Do you want to talk about it? His father asked. Jason knew he couldn't keep anything from his father, so he told him everything he knew so far. That's not good, son, his father said. I never would have expected her to cheat on you. Me neither, Dad, Jason said. Well, listen, if there's anything your mother and I can do, let us know, his father said. We're here for you. Thanks, Dad, Jason said. I appreciate that. Jason left work a couple of hours early and drove to the airport to find Karen's car. He found it in the short-term parking lot and retrieved the audio recorder. Looking around, he noticed that the rest of the car was spotless, just the way she always kept it. On the way home, he received a call from Karen. Hi, baby, she said. Just wanted to let you know I arrived safely. Thank you for informing me, he said. I'm getting settled in now, she added. I'll call you later tonight. Love you. Love you too, he said. Once he got home, he turned on the audio recorder. He hoped there would be nothing on it, and for the most part, there wasn't anything except for the sound of the road and her car radio. However, halfway through the recording, he discovered the truth about his marriage. He could hear Karen's phone ringing, and because it was connected to her car through Bluetooth and played through her speakers, he could hear both sides of the conversation. "Hey baby," a man's voice said. "Hey you," she replied. Jason wondered, who is this man calling her baby? "I can't wait to see you again," the man said. "Last week was amazing." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," she said with a mischievous laugh. "Are we all set for next week?" Jason was shocked, thinking, next week? What is she planning? "Everything is taken care of," the man assured her. "Did you tell your husband?" "Not yet," she said. "Don't worry, honey, I have everything under control." "Does he suspect anything?" the man asked. "He's clueless," she said. "He'll believe whatever I tell him." "I hope you're right," he said. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll see you tonight at the hotel, okay?" "I can't wait," he said. "Goodbye, my love." "Goodbye," she said, ending the call. Jason stared at the recorder, not able to believe what he had just heard. He played it again, just to make sure he wasn't misunderstanding. Not only was she cheating, but she also had plans for next week, their 10th anniversary week, and it didn't involve him. He cursed to himself, feeling anger and betrayal. How long had this been happening? And who was this person she was involved with? He grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down at his desk, reflecting on the past few months. Had he really been so oblivious to miss all the signs? He started to wonder what else she might be hiding. He had always respected her privacy and stayed out of her personal things. But now, that was no longer an option. He knew she kept her desk at home locked, but he also knew where she kept the key. He went to their bedroom and opened a small drawer in her jewelry box. There, he found the key to her desk on a ring with a few other keys. He took the ring and went into the room they used as her office. He opened the desk and started looking through her files. Normally, he would never have done this, but he felt that she no longer deserved any consideration after her betrayal of their marriage vows. What he found shocked him to the core. It seemed that Karen had been lying to him throughout their entire marriage. He pulled out a folder she used for her banking records and was shocked to see how much she had saved out of her pay. He knew how much she deposited in their joint account and was shocked to see that she had deposited much more than the agreed-upon 10% into her private account, which now had over $250,000. Looking through her purchases over the last few months, he saw that she had bought a very expensive man's watch along with other gifts. No doubt, for her lover, since she had never given him anything that extravagant. She had also bought a lot of expensive clothing online, including some risque stuff. Of course, he hadn't seen any of this. But there was much more. He also found medical bills for a family planning clinic. Apparently, she was able to get pregnant twice in the last 2 years and had gone in for a procedure. Both times, she paid cash out of her own account. He wondered if one or both of the children she went through with the procedure for was really his. He also saw that she had been purchasing birth control pills for at least the last 4 years on a regular basis. Worse yet, he found a receipt for Plan B morning after pills. According to the date on the receipt, Karen had purchased them earlier this week. And there was more. Among her receipts was a fairly recent one for a hefty down payment on a condo in a wealthy part of town. Was this to be her secret getaway? He wondered, or was this part of her plan to leave the marriage? There were also receipts for utilities and new furniture. He looked at the key ring he found earlier and wondered if one of them was a key to her condo. He intended to find out. He turned on her computer to see what he could find. He knew she always wrote her passwords down and found a piece of paper taped to the bottom of her keyboard with a list of usernames and passwords written on it. He tried the first one and sure enough, the computer came right up. Opening her browser, he found a link to an online email program and went in. Sure enough, the email client came right up and showed her inbox. Apparently, she was so confident he would never snoop on her that she kept the username and password saved on the system. He began reading her emails and was shocked at what he found. There were a number of emails to and from someone named Greg Wilson. Almost all of the emails were explicit, with Greg commenting on how much he loved spending time with Karen. Her responses were pretty much the same. He noticed the emails went back almost an entire year about the time he first noticed the changes in her. He spotted an email dated about 6 months ago that partially answered one of his questions. "Did you take care of that little issue?" Greg asked. "Yes," Karen said. "I went down and handled it today." Too bad you didn't keep it, Greg said. You could have passed it off as Jason's I couldn't do that, she replied. As far as he knows, I can't have any children. He would know it wasn't his. Jason thought back 6 months and realized that was about the time he first caught her lying. The person, he thought to himself. The lying, conniving, deceitful person. He kept reading through their emails. At one point, Greg suggested they spend time together in Karen's marital bed, but she refused. I will not do that to Jason, she told him in one email. Come on, Greg wrote back. Jason has no idea what's going on. No, she wrote back. I'm not going to do that. What if you had a place of your own? Greg asked. You could afford a nice condo with the money you make, and your husband would never know you may be onto something there, she wrote back. I do have my own account and Jason never asks about it. Let me see what's available. That was 3 months ago. The receipt for the down payment was dated just over a month ago. I got a condo, she told him in an email. I just made the down payment and I have new furniture coming in about a week. Jason doesn't know anything about it. Great, Greg wrote back. We'll have to enjoy every room in the place. Jason sat back, shocked at this revelation. He continued reading their emails. So why do you stay with your husband? Greg asked. Why not just leave him and move into the condo? Believe it or not, I still have feelings for him, Karen said. He may have a boring job, but I care about him and he's always been good to me. I only got the condo so we'd have a place to meet without risking being seen at a hotel. Besides, you're still married. Listen, babe, say the word and I'll break up with Christy in a heartbeat, Greg wrote back. She's a pain anyway. We'll see what happens after the conference, she wrote back. After the conference? What's happening after the conference? He asked himself. Jason began printing her emails and copying the receipts he found when the phone rang. Karen's number came up on the display. Hello, he said, answering the call. It's me, babe, Karen said. Are you okay? You sound out of sorts. I have a terrible headache. He said, not wanting to let her know he was onto her. Well, I just wanted to let you know I'm settling down for the night, she said. You take something for that headache and get some rest. I love you and I miss you, she said. Yeah, me too, he said. Goodbye. He ended the call, wondering if she noticed that he didn't specifically say he loved her or missed her. Truth is, he was close to losing control. He decided to find out who this Greg character was, so he began looking on the website for the company Karen worked for. Sure enough, he found him. Greg Wilson, the website said, is the regional manager for the real estate company Karen works for. In other words, she was romantically involved with her boss. He printed the page out and put it with his stack of evidence. Unable to rest, he decided to see if he could get into her condo. He verified the address but wondered if she had a security system set up. He looked through her paperwork and found a series of numbers on the paperwork next to the word alarm. Of course she would write it down, he thought to himself. She writes everything down. He closed down her computer and headed out, stopping in the garage to grab a pair of gloves. He didn't want to leave any evidence that he had been there. He found the complex easily and parked in her designated spot. Walking to the door, he put the gloves on and tried one of the keys on the ring he found in her jewelry box. Sure enough, the door opened and he walked in. He saw the alarm system's console on the wall next to the door and entered the code he found in her paperwork, then confirmed the alarm was off. After turning on some lights, he looked around the condo and was impressed with Karen's furniture choices. She always had good taste, he thought. It's a shame she wasn't as faithful as she was stylish. Of course, there were no pictures that included him. He hadn't really expected any, anyway. This was, after all, her secret hideout, her escape from their marriage. Walking into the kitchen, he noticed she even had a few dishes and some silverware. There wasn't much in the refrigerator, and the pantry seemed empty as well. He was somewhat surprised to see the place fully furnished, complete with tasteful artwork of flowers. There was even a large flat-screen television mounted to the wall. He walked into the master bedroom and noted that it, too, was fully furnished, complete with elegant curtains over the windows that fell to the floor. She loved those curtains and had put them all over their house. Looking down, he couldn't help but notice they hung directly over an electric heater. He shook his head, wondering if Karen even considered the potential fire hazard. Opening the dresser drawers, he found some apparel that he had never seen before, along with men's clothes he suspected belonged to Greg. He took out his phone and took pictures. He also found a card addressed to Karen in her nightstand drawer. He opened it and saw it was from Greg. Just wanted to say thanks for the gift, the card read. Can't wait for your housewarming. It was signed, Love, Greg. He felt like giving Greg a piece of his mind. He found even more clothes, both men's and women's, on hangers inside the walk-in closet. Inside the master bathroom, he couldn't help but spot the 2 toothbrushes hanging over the sink and the his and hers towels next to the shower. He pulled out his phone and took more pictures. The second bedroom only contained a small desk and a chair. A network cable was on the desk, suggesting she used that for her laptop. A few pieces of mail addressed to her were on the table. All of them were from utility companies. He took a picture of those, making sure her name and address were clearly visible in the photos. The windows here were also covered with long, lacy curtains that fell to the floor. As in the master bedroom, they too hung in front of an electric heater. Looking around, he noticed a few other things that could be considered fire or safety hazards. For example, there were no smoke detectors in the bedrooms, and the one in the kitchen ceiling looked very old. He wondered if it even had a battery in it. Making sure everything was as he found it, he turned off all the lights, reactivated the security system, and left, making sure the door was locked. He returned to his car and headed home, considering his options. Divorce was an obvious choice in his mind. Even if she got rid of the condo and ended things with her lover, he could never trust her again. He also knew that men often had a disadvantage when it came to finances. He knew from her financial records that she made considerably more than he did, so he hoped that would be enough to avoid paying her financial support. He decided to wait until he spoke with an attorney before taking any action. He also hoped that the fact that she already bought a condo in her name only would mean he wouldn't have to give her the house or sell it and share the proceeds. In his mind, she abandoned him when she bought the condo without telling him. They didn't have any children, so child support and custody weren't an issue. But he wanted the 2 cheaters to face the consequences of their actions. Violence was out of the question, as he had no desire to get into trouble. After he got home, he looked in the phone book and found a listing for Gregory Wilson. He hoped it was the correct Greg Wilson and dialed the number. Wilson residence said a female voice. "Is this Mrs. Wilson?" he asked. "Yes, it is," the woman said. "To whom am I speaking?" "My name is Jason Chandler." "Is your husband the regional manager for Acme Real Estate?" Jason asked. "Yes, he is," the woman said. "But he's gone to a conference this weekend, and he'll be out next week visiting other offices. You'll have to call the regional office and leave a message for him there." "Actually, Mrs. Wilson, you're the one I'd like to speak with," Jason said. "Oh?" she asked. "Yes, Ma," Jason said. "I hate to tell you this, but my wife is having an affair with your husband." "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Yes, I am," Jason said. "And I can prove it." "You have concrete proof of this?" she asked. "I can even show you where they meet, if you want," Jason said. He could hear her sigh over the phone. "Is tomorrow okay?" she asked. "Sure," Jason said. "What time works best for you?" "Make it about 1 in the afternoon," she said. He gave her the address and directions to Karen's condo. "I'll see you there then," Jason told her, ending the call. Smiling, he went to his desk and began making a list of things to do. First thing, he decided, would be to change the locks on the doors. He could finish that before meeting Greg's wife at Karen's condo. He considered getting very upset that night, but put the idea out of his head. Instead, he grabbed a piece of leftover pizza and ate that as he considered all of his options. Finishing the pizza, he went upstairs to bed. He woke up early the next day and went to a local hardware store, where he bought everything he needed to change the door locks. He also made another key to the condo. By noon, he had all of them changed. He showered and, grabbing the audio recorder and all of the emails he printed from Karen's account, went over to her condo to meet Greg's wife. He pulled into Karen's parking spot and spotted an attractive dark-haired woman in a Toyota Corolla nearby. He walked to the car and knocked on the window. She rolled the window down and looked at him. "Are you Christy Wilson?" he asked. She nodded her head. "I am," she said. "You must be Jason Chandler." "One and the same," he said, opening her door. "Come with me, I'll show you where they meet. You may want to put these on first," though he added, handing her a pair of latex gloves. "I don't want to leave any fingerprints." "Good idea," she said. They went to her door and Jason used the key he had made to open it. He was glad to see it worked. After turning off the security alarm, they stepped inside. Jason showed her the bedroom, opening the drawers in the closet so she could see Greg's clothing. "Oh my God," she said. "I've been looking for some of this stuff the past couple of weeks. I was wondering where his clothes were disappearing to." "Has your husband been wearing a Rolex watch lately?" Jason asked. She nodded her head. "Yes," she said. "He told me it was a gift from management." Jason shook his head and pulled the card out of Karen's nightstand. He opened it up and showed it to her. She read the note and began crying. "Is that his handwriting?" Jason asked. "Yes," she said, sobbing. "There's more," he said, pulling out the emails and the audio recorder. She read through the emails, tears flowing down her cheeks. Then he played the audio from Friday. "I'm sorry about all this," he said, wrapping his arms around her. He felt like crying as well, but held it in. "It's not your fault," she said. "I've suspected something like this for a while, but I never had any proof." After a while, she collected herself and looked at him. "So what are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to divorce her," he said. "What about you?" "I'm kicking that lying, cheating jerk out of the house as soon as I see him," she said. Suddenly, she stopped crying and looked at him. "I've got an idea," she said. "What's that?" he asked. "They want to live here together. Why don't we help them?" She asked. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean, why don't we pack their things up and drop it off over here?" She responded. Jason thought for a bit and smiled at her. "I kind of like that idea," he said. "But we'd better get moving. They'll be back in a day or two." She shook her head. "Greg said he would be gone for a week after the convention," she said. "I'd bet anything she'll find an excuse to be gone as well." Jason suddenly remembered the recorded conversation. Karen specifically asked him if he had everything set for the next week, but didn't indicate what it was they had planned. "Shoot," he said. "I think you're right. Still, I want to get her things out of my house as soon as possible." "I agree," she said. "Meet you back here in, say, 3 hours?" "Sounds good," he said. "I'm just going to toss her things in trash bags, so I think I can do that and be back here in 3 hours." "I'll see you then," she said, standing up. Jason took a good look at her. She was shorter than Karen, with a girl-next-door cuteness that added to her attractive figure. He thought Greg was a stupid jerk to cheat on this woman. They left the condo and arrived about 3 hours later, their cars packed with bags full of their respective spouses' belongings. They carried the bags into the condo and placed them in the nearly empty second bedroom, not caring if anything broke. They knew the two cheaters would have to spend hours sorting through everything. "I don't know about you, but I wasn't exactly very careful with his things," she said. He laughed. "Neither was I," Jason said. They laughed and did a high five. He looked at her. "I don't know about you, but I'm hungry," he said. "Me too," she said. "I could really go for a nice juicy hamburger." "A big, thick cheeseburger sounds really good to me as well," he said. "I know just the place. Care to join me?" "My treat." "Lead on," she said. He drove to the bar he and Ron liked to visit, and she followed. After they parked, Christy looked at the front of the building. "A bar?" she asked. "Trust me," he said. "They make the best burgers here. You'll love it." "Okay," she said. "I just hope you're not going to make me drink alcohol and take advantage of me." He laughed. "As inviting as that sounds, I wouldn't do that to you," he said. "Darn," she said, laughing. They went inside and ordered a soda and a burger with fries. As they ate, they swapped stories of their failing marriages. Her story was somewhat similar to his. She met him in college, and they married shortly thereafter, except she wanted children, and he didn't. He started working for Acme Real Estate, and she got a job doing accounts receivable for a home improvement company. "Are you a CPA?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I never went quite that far, but I was hoping to do so someday," she said. He told her about his background and job. "We're always on the lookout for a good person," he said. "Maybe if you can get me a resume, we can help each other out." "I just may do that, Mr. Chandler," she said, taking a bite of her burger. Just then, his phone buzzed. He saw the number was Karen's phone, so he answered. "Hello," he said in a neutral tone of voice. "Hey, baby," Karen said. He could tell she had been drinking. "What you up to?" "Oh, just down at the bar getting a burger," he said. "What's up with you?" "Guess what?" she asked. "I got the top seller award," she said, not waiting for his response. "I'm happy for you," he said. "Yeah. And they want me to stay here in Vegas next week to work with their agents," she said. Of course, he already knew that was a lie. "Isn't that fantastic? There's talk that I might get moved into management soon." No doubt, by working hard, he thought to himself. "That's great," he said. "What about our anniversary? That's coming up this Wednesday." "I know," she said. "And I'm sorry about that. Maybe we can celebrate it next weekend." "Don't worry," he said. "I know your work is important to you and I wouldn't want you to miss a big sale." "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "It's just that you only get to celebrate 10 years of marriage once, but I understand how much your job means to you. Don't worry about it." Well, yes, my job is important to me, but I thought you might be happy for me, she said. I am very happy, he told her. Go, work with your agents. Don't worry about me. I love you, she said. Okay, he told her. Me too. Bye. With that, he ended the call and looked at Christy. Well, there it is, he told her. She shook her head. She's actually choosing Greg over your anniversary, Christy said, placing her hand on his. He almost broke down crying. Here was someone he barely met more concerned about him than his own wife. What a jerk. I'm sorry, thanks, he said, trying to smile. He pulled out Jerry's card and called his private number. Jerry, he said when the older man answered, Jason Chandler here. I just heard from Karen, and she tells me she's going to be in Vegas for another week. And I take it you don't believe her? Jerry asked. Not for a minute, Jason said. Well, I was just working on your report, but I can have my guys watch them and see what they do, he said. We can go from there. I heard the conference wrapped up a couple hours ago, and they're now in full party mode. Most everyone is going home tomorrow. By the way, your wife and her lover spent the night together last night. I've got some video I think you might be interested in. I'll email it to you if you want. It'll all be in my report. That would be great, Jason said. Thanks. He ended the call and looked at Christy. Well, we'll find out tomorrow what's really going on, he said. The two lovebirds spent the night together. My pie is going to email me some video. Are you interested in looking at it with me? Not really, she said. But I feel like I should. He nodded his head in understanding. Well, let's head over to my house, then he said, standing up. After Jason paid for the meal, they left the bar and headed for his house. By the time they got there and settled into his office, the video had arrived in his email. Want something to drink before we watch this? He asked. Sure, she said. Coke if you have it. One Coke coming right up, he said, going into the kitchen. He came back with 2 cold Cokes and handed one to her. He played the video and they watched Karen and Greg getting closer. Both Christy and Jason fought back tears as they watched their spouses together. Even more devastating was the conversation afterward. What do you think our spouses are doing right now? Karen asked. Well, if I know Christy, she's probably watching one of her boring movies, Greg said. Or maybe reading one of her silly books. Yeah, I know what you mean, she said. I imagine Jason is probably playing with another one of his silly spreadsheets or looking over the stock reports. Greg chuckled at that. You'd think he was saving the world or something. Christ, his father's company, sells tires, for crying out loud. What's so darn important about that? So have you figured out what you're going to tell Dipstick after the awards banquet tomorrow? Greg asked. Yeah, she said. I'll just tell him I've been asked to stay in Vegas for a week to shadow the reps here. He'll believe that. Heck, he'll believe anything I tell him. I could say the moon is made of green cheese and he'd go along with it, and by the time he figures it out, we'll be on the beach in Hawaii, he said. Hawaii? She screamed. That jerk is taking some girl off to Hawaii? I'll tear his head off. She looked at Jason. Sorry for calling your wife a jerk. Don't be, he said. I would have called her the same thing. They turned back to the video. So Greg continued. What about your anniversary? Are you just going to blow it off? Hawaii sounds much more fun to me than a night at a steakhouse, she said. I'll promise to make it up to him. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Greg looked at her. You're insensitive, you know that? He asked. She shrugged her shoulders. It's only our 10th anniversary, she said. There'll be more. Who cares about that? I need your companionship right now. With that, they started being close again, prompting Jason to stop the video. I've seen enough, Jason said. How about you? Christy nodded her head, tears running down her cheeks. More than enough, she said. I'll be making an appointment Monday to see an attorney about a divorce, he said. You want to join me? Would you mind? She asked quietly. Not at all, he told her. Christy broke down, sobbing. Jason held her in his arms and let her cry on his shoulder. He felt like crying as well, but decided to hold it in. He comforted her as much as he could while battling his own emotions. Would you mind if I stayed here with you tonight? She asked. Of course you can stay, he said. Stay the week if you want. Thanks, she said. I can't believe I gave that guy all those years. All that time I fell for his lies. I know exactly what you mean, Jason said. He led her upstairs to the master bedroom and found an old t-shirt that looked long enough for her to wear to bed. She took it and went into the bathroom to change. He changed into a pair of pajamas as he waited for her to return and climbed into bed. What's the matter? She asked. Haven't you ever seen a woman's legs before? None that look as good as yours, Jason said. Compliments will get you everywhere, sir, she teased. He wrapped an arm around her and held her close, taking in her scent. She put an arm over his chest and snuggled close to him. You know you're the only woman besides my wife I've ever been in bed with in over 10 years? He asked. And you're the only man I've been with besides my husband, she said. They looked into each other's faces for what seemed like an eternity. Then Christy leaned over and gave Jason a soft, tender hug. He responded, hugging her back. They fell asleep that way and woke up the next morning spooning each other. Good morning, sleepyhead, she said. You don't need to move on my account, she added as he got up to use the bathroom. Good morning, beautiful, he told her. I'll be right back. He went into the bathroom. By the time he came out, Christy had helped herself to the kitchen and was making them each a helping of bacon and eggs. Looking at the clock on the wall, he saw it was 8:30 a.m. His attention turned back to Christy. He loved watching her cook wearing his old t-shirt and was reminded for a moment of happier times when Karen made breakfast for them every morning. Wow, that smells good, he said. I hope you don't mind me helping myself to your kitchen, she said. Not at all, he told her. I can't remember the last time someone made me breakfast. Karen never cooked for you? She asked. At first she did, he said. But she quit making breakfast a long time ago. Said it took up too much time and she had to make herself presentable for her clients. Meanie Christy muttered. I agree, he said. He took in the aroma of the bacon as she placed a large plate in front of him. He devoured his food like a man who hadn't eaten in a month. Wow, that was good. You cook like this every morning? Whenever I can, she said. Jason's phone buzzed. Looking at the screen, he saw Jerry's name and number, so he answered. Good morning, Jerry, he said. Working on Sundays now? Jerry laughed. More often than I care to, he said. I just wanted to let you know that your wife and her lover boarded their flight in Las Vegas just before 6 this morning. They had a 40-minute layover at LAX, and the plane took off from there about an hour ago. They'll be landing in Honolulu in about 5 hours or so. I have the flight information if you want it. I do, Jason said. They're on American Airlines Flight 31, Jerry said. I have someone in Honolulu ready to pick up their trail when they get there. Thanks, Jerry, Jason said, writing down the information. He ended the call and looked back at Christy. Well, he said, it's on. They're on their way to Hawaii. Karen sat back in her seat after the plane took off. Glancing out the window, she watched as the plane headed out over the Pacific Ocean. This is it, she thought to herself. Looking to her left, she saw Greg was already sound asleep in the seat next to hers. She closed her eyes for a moment and thought about the last 10 years. For a moment, she felt a pang of guilt at what she was doing to her husband who foolishly trusted her. Deep down, she knew that this was just the latest in a series of bad decisions on her part. But she rationalized she owed this to herself. Eventually, she thought, this will end with Jason none the wiser. Her marriage would go on, and they would ultimately retire and grow old together. Her first bad decision was telling Jason she couldn't have children. The truth was, she could, but she just didn't want to have a family. The idea of being a mother might appeal to some, but not to her. So she told Jason that a medical complication forced her to not be able to have children. He believed her explanation and eventually accepted it. But she had problems with her birth control and was forced to stop using it. The side effects finally became too much for her to endure, so she decided to use alternative methods instead. And then there were her affairs. She remained faithful to her husband for the first 7 years of their marriage, but that changed one day while she was out with a client, who happened to be very good-looking and also very successful. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, but one she never really regretted. Then she met Greg and things changed. He was everything her husband wasn't. Jason liked to analyze everything before making a decision, while Greg was spontaneous and made decisions on a whim. Jason's life and career had been decided long ago. He had worked for his father all his life and still did. Soon, he would become the CFO of his father's tire company, and one day, he would take over as president and CEO. Greg, on the other hand, didn't know where he would be in 5 years and took things one day at a time. While Jason thought about the future, Greg lived for the present. At first, they met at motels and hotels around town or at a house they had listed for sale, but she became concerned that someone might spot them and alert either Jason or Greg's wife, Christy. Then there was the night that Jason expressed concern that they were growing apart. She got scared and ended things with Greg for a while. She focused all her love on her husband, but that only lasted a short time. Greg wanted to start seeing each other again, but she was afraid that Jason might find out. She had to come up with a solution, so she decided to buy her own condo. That way she would have a special place for her and Greg. He wanted to be with her. Even though she considered Jason to be somewhat conservative, she still cared about him. It also helped that she and Jason decided long ago to file separate tax returns. She could easily keep the condo a secret from him while still enjoying the tax benefits. It was a win-win situation. Or at least that's what she told herself. All of that led to this, her latest decision to spend a week in Hawaii with Greg. She took a week's vacation from her office, telling them she was going to Hawaii with her husband after the annual corporate event. Greg, meanwhile, told his wife he would be on a business trip for the next week, which wasn't uncommon for him. She lied to Jason, telling him she would be in Vegas for the week. Of course, all it would take is a phone call or two, and he would know better. Fortunately for her, Jason believed whatever she told him. The only downside was that she would miss spending her 10th anniversary with Jason. She would make it up to him, though, once she got back, and all this would remain her secret. She smiled as she looked down at the blue water below them, thinking about Hawaii. She pulled out her phone and checked for messages or calls. She wasn't surprised to see that Jason hadn't texted or emailed her. He wasn't much for texting and preferred to communicate either by phone or in person. She chuckled to herself. She felt the plane shake and wondered if they had encountered turbulence. She felt the plane descend and the engine sounded different. She realized something was terribly wrong when she looked out the window. Suddenly there was commotion in the cabin and she could feel the forces pressing her into the seat. Looking outside, she could tell they were going down fast. Oh my goodness, she thought to herself. This is it. We're going to crash. I'm going to die. Oxygen masks suddenly fell down and she could hear other passengers, including Greg, screaming as the flight attendants tried to prepare them for the inevitable. She looked at her phone and, with tears streaming down her face, made one last decision. Jason and Christy had finished breakfast and put away the last of the dishes. They sat back down at the table and discussed their plans for dealing with their unfaithful spouses. Jason was impressed with Christy's ability to analyze a problem. Right now, he felt closer to her than he had to Karen for months. He had just returned to the table with a second cup of coffee for them when his phone buzzed. He saw Karen's name and number on the screen, so he put it on speaker. Hello, he asked. JC heard Karen cry out. It was hard to hear as there was a lot of background noise and they heard other people screaming. Yes, Karen, what's going on? He asked. Not ... time, plane, down. So sorry, forgive. Oh. They heard before the call suddenly ended. Jason and Christy looked at each other, shocked. He tried calling Karen back, but it went straight to voicemail. He looked at Christy. Try calling Greg, he told her. She hurried into the front room and retrieved her phone from her purse. As he watched, she attempted to call Greg, but shook her head. It went straight to voicemail, she said. He went into his home office and turned on his computer. After it booted up, he did a search and found a contact number for the airline. He called and received vague information, but was finally able to speak to someone who confirmed they were investigating reports that the plane had crashed. He left his name and number, along with Karen's and Greg's information, and was told someone would contact him. He also left Christy's information so they could reach out to her. He did a quick Google search, but nothing appeared. He figured it would take some time before any news emerged. They went into the front room and turned on the television, wondering if any updates had been reported. Jason flipped through the channels, but nothing was being shared. He looked at his phone and reflected on the events leading up to this moment. Finally, one of the news networks reported that an American Airlines flight to Honolulu had crashed in the Pacific, but there were no specific details. Oh my goodness, Christy said, her hand covering her mouth. Jason held her tightly and silently prayed that Karen was still alive. He despised what she did to their marriage, but he didn't desire her death. An hour later, his phone rang. He lowered the volume on the television and answered. Mr. Chandler? A woman asked. This is he said. I just wanted to reach out and confirm that your wife's flight has crashed, she said. I don't have any more information for you at this time, but we'll contact you as soon as we have more details. Thank you, Jason said, ending the call. He and Christy embraced one another and shed a few tears. A few minutes later, Christy's phone rang and she received the same information. Sometime later, Jason's father called. It was not unusual for his parents to contact him when they heard about such news on TV. Hey, Jason's father said. Hey, Dad, how are things? He asked. Just got back from church. Did you see the news about that crash? His father asked. Yeah, I did, Jason said. That's terrible, his father said. By the way, how's Karen? Isn't she on her way back from Vegas? She's not doing too well right now, Dad, Jason said. She was on that airplane that crashed. What? His father exclaimed, shocked. What was she doing going to Hawaii without you? She was with her boyfriend, Jason said. Oh my goodness, his father said. I'm so sorry to hear that, son. Listen, take the week off and take care of things. I'll let Mike know. If there's anything we can do, just give us a call, okay? Thanks, Dad, Jason said. He ended the call, his mind filled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was saddened by the likely death of Karen. On the other hand, he was angry with her for being unfaithful. He was also upset with himself for not confronting her. Strangely enough, but he wasn't upset about the fact that her death would mean no divorce. Then he had another thought. He would have to handle all of her final expenses, including the condo. Darn, he thought to himself. He looked at Christy and pondered how she would handle all of this. What would she do? He had an idea and approached her. Christy, he said, why don't you sell your place and move in here with me? She looked up at him, tears filling her eyes. Do you mean that? She asked. Yes, I do, he said. I have another bedroom upstairs, and you're going to have a lot to deal with over the next few months. Maybe we could help each other get through this. She thought for a minute before answering. Why not, she said. But only on one condition. What's that? He asked. You let me stay in your spare room, she said. Seriously? Jason asked. This was moving much faster than he thought it would, and he wondered if it was wise. He set that thought aside and decided to throw caution to the wind. Yes, she said. I haven't really had someone to rely on for a long time. Last night, I felt comforted for the first time in ages. Is that okay with you? It's more than okay, he said. Good, she said. Then I'll run back to the house to get my things and I'll be back over tonight. Jason nodded his head. I'll be here, he said. After she left, he called Lucy, the woman who ran the office Karen normally worked out of. Hello, she said when she answered her cell. Lucy, this is Jason Chandler, he said. Oh, hi, Jason, she said. How's Hawaii? I don't know, he said. I hear it's nice this time of year. Why? Well, Karen said the two of you were going there after the company meeting, Lucy said. I assumed you were on your way. No, Jason said. She was on her way to Hawaii, but not with me. She left with Greg. What? Lucy asked, shocked. That's right, Jason said. But she didn't make it. Neither did he. The plane they were on crashed into the Pacific Ocean earlier today. Maybe you saw it on the news. Oh no, Lucy said. Do you know if she made it okay? I don't think either of them survived the crash, he said. I'm so sorry, she said. Please accept my condolences. And thanks for letting me know. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but the company has life insurance for all their employees. I'll get the paperwork started first thing in the morning, but I will need something from the airline. Can you get that to me? Yeah, I'll get what I can, he said. I do have a question for you, though. What's that? Lucy asked. Were you aware that Karen was having a secret relationship with Greg? He asked. I suspected there was something going on. There were rumors, but nothing more, Lucy said. We usually don't gossip about things like that in the office. I see, he said. Well, that's all I have. I'll be in touch. Thanks, she said. And again, please accept my condolences. I appreciate that, Jason said, ending the call. That night, as he and Christy watched television, a report came on about the crash. According to the report, the plane's final moments were captured by a crewman aboard a freight liner that was just a couple miles from the crash site. The network aired the amateur video, which clearly showed the airplane rapidly falling, nose first. It looked like the craft literally pancaked as it hit the water. The report said the freighter changed course to see if they could recover any survivors. They rescued a number of bodies from the water, but there were no survivors. They also recovered a lot of luggage, including Karen's and Greg's. Neither Karen's nor Greg's bodies were found. Epilogue: the next few months were hectic for both Jason and Christy. She moved in with Jason and sold her house. Jason had plenty to deal with, including Karen's condo. There was nothing in it he wanted, so he gave everything away to Goodwill, which was more than happy to take it. He finally sold the condo, getting back what Karen had originally paid for it. Both he and Christy received an insurance check for $500,000 from Acme Real Estate for the deaths of their respective partners. Christy moved in with Jason, and they immediately began removing all reminders of Karen. Pictures came down, knickknacks were put away, and furniture, especially the bed, were replaced. Jason let family members take what they wanted. The rest, including the 2 cars, was either sold, donated, or disposed of. Jason also had to go through a process to resolve Karen's bank accounts. After a couple months and a lot of paperwork, he received a check for around $250,000. Lawyers approached both Jason and Christy, looking to capitalize on the crash. Further investigation revealed that the crew misunderstood warnings from the onboard computer and took the wrong actions. The craft fell at an estimated 12,000 feet per minute and hit the water at somewhere around 135 miles per hour, meaning that it took just over 3 minutes for the plane to crash into the ocean. Karen's last 3 minutes, some of which were on the phone to him, must have been terrifying, he thought. Her last act had been one of remorse, no doubt brought on by the realization that she was falling to her death and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Nevertheless, he thought, it was too little and far too late. Fortunately, the airline settled with all the affected families, offering a little over $175,000 to each passenger's family. Between Jason and Christy, they received a bit more than $6 million after everything had been taken care of. Of course, taxes were paid, but they still ended up with a very comfortable sum of money. Since neither Karen's nor Greg's remains were found, there was no need for a funeral, but Jason and Christy held memorial services, mostly for the benefit of their respective families. Neither one shed a tear for their deceased partners. 3 months after working together, Christy left her job and joined Jason's team. They had developed strong feelings for each other. One evening, while enjoying their meal at a local Texas roadhouse, Jason knelt down and asked Christy to marry him. Christy couldn't contain her excitement and everyone in the restaurant clapped. "I'm so glad you finally decided to propose," she whispered. "Why is that?" he wondered. "Well, you're going to be a parent," she replied. "I love you so much," he expressed. "I love you even more," she responded. "But can I ask you for one thing, what is it?" he inquired. "Please don't expect me to travel long distances," she requested. He chuckled and held her tightly. "Don't worry, my dear," he assured her.